Let's be innovative. Let's challenge a norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The ButtKicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. It was a bumpy off-season for the Lionheart Racing Series, but amidst all the upheaval comes a new era for the series. For the very first time, multi-class action graces the Lionheart ring in a brand new era of sports car racing. 90 minutes on the clock and 2 ultimate driving machines. It's a recipe that promises delight. Welcome to the start of the long championship slog. This is the ButtKicker Grand Prix, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. Hello everyone and welcome along back to RaceSpotTV and coverage for the 2023 ButtKicker Sports Car Series presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, delighted to be alongside with Andrew Kinsella to kick off this momentous championship run. Don't forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to RaceSpot.tv/timing throughout the course of all Lionheart competition for 2023. Let's dive into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show because, Andrew, well, unfortunately on Wednesday nights, they're a lot more free, at least here on RaceSpotTV, but it means we focus now with 2 classes of competition on a brand new championship for the Lionheart Racing Series.
Absolutely, Arjuna. It's been a season of change for iRacing and for the Lionheart Series. There's the well-publicized falling out that has happened with a certain sanctioning body in the United States, but it's opened up an opportunity for a new championship, and that is the sports car series that we have in front of us here today. And look at this schedule, Arjuna. It's just hit after hit to begin this season, starting with Sebring today, but Spa-Francorchamps in 1 week time as well. That's going to be amazing to watch.
Yeah, here's a look at the next level racing schedule for what's going to be a run into 2024. We'll close things out at the World Center of Racing. Always exciting when you're able to head to Daytona under the night lights to hopefully crown a champion. But for the first time, Andrew, it's truly a global feel, because a lot of the time, of course, with the open wheel machines, we focus a little bit more on America. We're going to go on a world tour of some of the best tracks and some of those niche tracks that also don't get enough love.
Absolutely, and it just throughout the entire season too. It's not just one like front-loaded or back-loaded. You're going to be in Japan, you're going to be in Europe, you're going to be in North America. It's going to be a real true tour of the world, as you say.
So let's talk a little bit more about our Gomez Sim Industry Series details as we head into this 10th/11th year of the Lionheart Racing Series. The cars on offer for you: the BMW M Hybrid V8, the brand new GTP LMDH entry from the BMW Skunk Works guys, and of course the BMW M4 GT3 machine. As always, in Lionheart competition, drivers have a custom fixed setup built by the Majors Garage. No longer the man sitting alongside me here in the commentary booth. Cash and prizes. What a prize up on offer for the drivers. Just under $20,000, with both the LMDH and GT3 champions winning a BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California. That is definitely one to talk about in the 90-minute timed races with live race control. I mean, Andrew, I wish that we could get the prizes just for being up here in the commentary booth for what's going to be an exciting 18 rounds.
Absolutely. This almost made me want to sort of dust off my commentary boots and take up prototype or GT racing to try and have a shot at this. But what an experience, and what a prize package that the Lionheart Series has put together. Sometimes adversity breeds opportunity, and that's definitely the case for the Lionheart drivers this season.
So that's a look at our series details. It's going to be a fun ride, that's for sure, as we'll crown our very first champions, and 3 champions. We'll talk about that in a few moments' time. Here's a look at our ButtKicker Sports Car Series Arena Track Analysis. For the very first time, we're going to talk more about the venue, because, of course, not much to talk about in terms of previous event history. We head to the former World War II airfield, the very first race here held back on New Year's Eve back in 1950, and since then, 2 years later, went on to host the very first 12 hours of Sebring. It has become known as the true test of an endurance racing vehicle. Respecting the bumps is not just a suggestion, trust me, it is a requirement. Fuel windows are interesting. It basically is going to pan out that the drivers in both classes are going to dive down to pit lane at the very same time for a pit lane delta of 22 seconds, not including the time that they'll spend stationary in the pit lane. Here's a look from up above at what is a very flat 6-kilometer, 3.7-mile track here at the Sebring International Raceway, Andrew. And of course, everyone loves to talk about Sunset Bend, the corner of a million turns, but realistically, the most scary turn is turn number 1.
It is. Turn number 1 is intimidating for a driver in any car, in any series, whether they're a prototype or a GT driver who's been through there hundreds of times before, or it's an IndyCar driver making their debut in a sports car coming through there the first time. It's just so intimidating. That wall right on that apex there, it just produces action every single time. And then, of course, it funnels down into that turn 2, turn 3 complex where we saw so much action in the real world this year.
Oh, don't get me started about that, Andrew, because 12 hours of Sebring here on RaceSpotTV, I ranted about that plenty. Qualifying underway, and a bit of a change this year. It's still solo car qualifying, drivers getting 4 laps, but it's an extended 15-minute session, especially to account for the fact that we're going to where? The Circuit de la Sarthe. That's going to be an interesting one, to say the very least. Qualifying, well, let's see how it shakes up right now. The exciting thing, I think, to talk about, Andrew, is in GT3, we've got a Pro and an AM championship, which is going to mix things up and give some drivers incentive to fight maybe lower down in the GT3 class with less experience in the car. But not only do we have our Lionheart staples, we are getting an influx of some of the top endurance drivers from across of the iRacing platform.
Absolutely. There's some really top names both in Lionheart and in endurance racing, as you say, and I can't wait to see how these drivers mix it up. We've already seen Adam Blocker take his car to the front of the LMDH field right now, just pipping Adam Young. And Young, of course, is a newcomer to Lionheart, but he's no stranger to these cars.
Not a surprise, maybe, to see the likes of Sean Campbell and Miguel Vigo at the top of the time charts for your GT3 class. Miguel Vigo, part of your Hydro Race geodesic racing team. I apologize in advance for calling them the Alpine Stars geodesic racing team, but this is why you do not do title sponsorships in sim racing, because us commentators aren't smart enough to deal with it. Sean Campbell, though, finds some more improvement at the top. A driver that we've seen in the IMSA Esports Michelin Global Championship racing for the hardpoint by Delta Sport number 99 Porsche. He'll be in that BMW, and I'm going to be very excited to see how him, Miguel Vigo, Carlos Villa, Josh Chin, and a handful of these other drivers will go on. Qualifying strategies, though, in this brand new LMDH, Andrew, is what we get to talk about very briefly here, because we get hybrid systems to talk about.
Yeah, and it is a little bit of an added complexity for these drivers to just master that hybrid system and the hybrid deployment. You gotta make sure that you have the right mixture when you come through, and that you're in the right settings, and it's just a little bit more complexity. You have to really respect what that hybrid can do. But one of the drivers who's been doing a lot of racing in this car, Austin Young, he's coming off of Sunset Bend right now. How's he looking, Arjuna?
Just look how bumpy it is. Young across the line is going to find 0.3 of a second and jump himself to pole position and set himself up for what's going to be his final attempt in qualifying. But we'll ride on board with Adam Blocker, someone that we saw competing in the iRacing 12 Hours of Sebring. See how he can get, 24 Hours of Daytona in the top split, came in the top 5 in this BMW LMDH, running through turn number 1. Look how close to the inside they're going to get, and onto the power in through what is technically turn 2, onto the brakes into 3. Got to be so careful in these cars not to lock the rears. It can be so easy to do, especially with the way the regen system plays out. But as you wind your way out of turn 5, important to get on the power early and sweep through Big Bend into what's going to be a primary passing opportunity, A, but also B, the scariest place for traffic, the bumpy braking zone at the hairpin. So difficult to tame the car as it tries to squirrel from underneath you, but through second gear, Blocker winds his way now through Fangio in towards Cunningham Corner. Another corner that really just shows how bumpy the track tends to be. 1:43.7 the best for Blocker. Let's see how we can do to match the 43.5 effectively for Young. A little bit slow on the exit there down out of Cunningham, sweeping through Collier, where you're trying to set up on the left-hand side to get the best run out of Tower Corner. It's so easy to pick up a bit of gravel on the left, but Blocker seemingly getting through safely. This is a double left-hander that will be known as the danger zone for some GT3s, because it leads into Jean de Bion Bend, where LMDHs will look to attack with vigor. GT3 cars just trying to survive as they run their way up through Le Mans. Plenty more runoff on the outside if you're not careful through traffic. And then down the Ullman Straight into the corner of a million lines. There's only a couple that are really fast, and there's a couple that are guaranteed to see you crash. How's Adam Blocker going to get through the corner? Down into 5th for a moment, 4th, but not into 3rd. He sweeps his way out wide and into the wall. That's definitely not a line to take through Sunset Bend.
Oh, and you could tell Adam Blocker, he was pushing so hard throughout that lap. It was a high commitment lap, and he just didn't quite nail that line, as you say, through Sunset Bend. And you just saw how easy it is to miss that line just a little bit, and you find yourself with no room on the outside, and Adam Blocker straight into the wall, and that's going to put paid to his efforts here to try and get pole, I think.
So one other name to talk about is Marius Valiokis. He's a regular for some that have joined us on Thursdays for the Lionheart Retro Series, but someone that has joined up with the guys over at Race Clutch who run the Alpine esports team, to give its proper name and pronounce it properly. Going to be excited to see how he's going to get along. He's 3rd. You got Flynn Lazier, currently sits in 4th. He's running in the Penguin RC, number 24. John Badefer in the Hydro Race geodesic racing car. Phil Krause, Graham Saunders, another one that we've seen compete in Indy cars in the past on RaceSpot, but good to see him in his bread and butter wheelhouse. 4 minutes or so left to go, and basically we're coming to the end of qualifying, because the final GT3 laps are getting underway and the final LMDH laps are getting set to wind to a close. Will the number 23 find some extra speed? It will be 0.3. It should be enough to get him up to 2nd to the outside of the front row.
Yeah, really nice lap there from Valiokis, and it just does enough to get to unseat Adam Blocker there. It's really interesting to see how this new order is going to shape out, Arjuna, because we have so many established stars from the Lionheart series, and as you say, a lot of interlopers here to start this season, and it's going to be very interesting to see who is going to come out as the cream of the crop as the season wears on.
As Ryan Otis goes up to third, it doesn't really matter because Sean Campbell decided that he wanted to do 1:59.647. He's almost half a second clear of the rest of the GT3 field. Can Joshua Chin have something to say about that? Now, Josh Chin won to talk about in a race where we expect 2 pit stops. Fuel saving may come into play. Joshua Chin's got a great right foot. Carlos Villa up to 4th in the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing car, but no improvement for the private label Team Hype number 73.
A little bit uncharacteristically slow lap there from Chin, but we know he's not necessarily the best qualifier, but he is a great driver throughout the course of a race, and he will always find a way up into that podium position. Andrew Marquez now coming across the line. 201.4 is not going to be good enough to get him into the top of this class here of GT3s.
Yeah, and one by one now, we're just going to see the final of your GT3s coming towards the line. Wouldn't be shocked if a handful of cars continue to roll for some pit lane practice, as Chris Staples, one of our AMs, will choose to do. And you will be able to note the AMs by the yellow numbers and the AM tag on their name. Michael O'Brien is going to find a 10th or so of a second. Not a bad thing, all things considered. Mike Rigney, no improvement in the AM category, one of our drivers, of course, that we've seen plenty of competition from in the past, and I think now we just have time to potentially get one more car as Flynn Lazier to the line with a 1:44.055. I mean, look at that consistency at the very least.
Yeah, Flynn has been incredibly consistent here so far this weekend, and I've been really impressed with him. He was sort of a late addition to the Lionheart field here, and he's picked this up really, really quickly, so it's been good to see him getting up to speed as quickly as he has.
So here we go. This is what we were talking about. Handful of cars just all practicing their pit lane runs by themselves. Although blasting to the line is our reigning Lionheart Open Wheel Series champion, Phil Krause, who I think is just getting in a few more laps under his belt in a fixed setup competition, let's not forget. And Andrew, I'm sure your life's a little bit easier now that you don't have the complication of having to build setups for 3 different series. Just Jim Herrick left to come across the line, and he will not improve, just a 100th off of his previous best.
I will say they did have to replace me with a platoon of different people over at Open Wheel, so that's all I'm going to say about that.
Hey, I mean, didn't they have to replace you with a platoon of people across of 3 series?
That is true.
I mean, there you go. Just look at that. Looking from up above at this fantastic Sebring International Raceway, I mean, can you imagine the goal that some of these commentators on RaceSpotTV have, Andrew, to suggest that we should repave the Sebring International Raceway?
Absolutely not. This is a one-of-a-kind, unique racetrack. It is what it is. The bumps are part of the challenge here at Sebring, and I think that if you talk to any real-world driver who has driven here in a 12 hours of Sebring, they would say you can never repave this place. It is what it is. It just, the character, the absolute challenge that those bumps produce, you need to keep them right where they are.
I thought you were going to say ask anyone sane, because clearly the likes of you and O'Leary and Cam Roger are not sane. There's a look at our track conditions. It's relatively warm, although I think we're going to be racing into the evening, which is going to mean that there might be some calls on tires, because let's not forget, recent updates in the world of iRacing mean that you can change tires at the same time as taking fuel, and so even with limited tank capacities in both machines, that is definitely something that is going to be on the cards. For the very first time, it's qualifying in the books for your ButtKicker Sports Car Series presented by the BMW Performance Driving School, and the field will grid up for what will be a full pace lap before they roll themselves around to get themselves started for the first 90-minute shootout here in 2023. Let's run you down how they're going to line up with your ButtKicker starting grid. It's Austin Young, the very first pole position winner in the LMDH class. It will be the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing number 11 alongside Marius Valiokas for Race Clutch. That brings us to the green flag. Adam Blocker and John Bader for a lineup on row number 2 with Flynn Lazier in the very white number 24 alongside Phil Krause in that 91 pink machine. Behind them, starting on row number 4, it's Graham Saunders in the number 100 Hydro Race Geodesic Racing car. Caleb Bensi alongside with Michael O'Brien in the first of the Graphics LC cars, having Barrett Roll for company on the edge of the top 10. It's Tyler Graf, Alex Guyon sharing row 6, while rolling from 13th, it's David Sirois. He's got Kite Bombers back on his outside. Matt Taylor and Alexander Van der Sand have some work to do from back in the pack, while Chris Fowler is the final car with a lap time on the board. Mike Rasmas will line up on his outside. Not just one class, of course, but two classes to talk our way through, and so now we talk to you about Sean Campbell becoming pole position winner number 1 in your GT3s. He'll line up alongside the first of the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing contingent in this BMW M4 GT3, Ryan Otis and Carlos Villa behind. Josh Chin and Christopher Hill line up in 5th and 6th positions, with Eric Staropoli lining up on the inside of Matthew Morhart. It's Lionel Kalisto and Chris Staples on the bookend of the top 10, Chris Wilson and Brian Bennett 11th and 12th, with some AMs getting up in towards the mix. It's Andrew Marquez and Nate Siefker behind, with Dustin Wardlow 15th, seeing Trevor Malone on his right-hand side. It'll be James Paulson and Mike Rigney behind them, while completing your top 20, Chris Reagan and Jim Herring. We're into the meat of the AMs, and Clip Martin sees a pro in Dean Moll alongside Creighton Carter and Eliza Indranini, 23rd and 24th. It's Drew White, Craig Forsyth, Gabe Wood, George Anzaldo, and Luis Gonzalez Nunez, Sam Crow. Those are your top 30, of course, in this GT3 class. Look at the spread in times as well. That's going to be one that is definitely going to play out in an interesting fashion, you would have to assume. Full pace lap means plenty of opportunities for the drivers to get some heat and temperature into their tires. And it also means plenty of time for us to work our way through. As always, 4 featured onboard cameras. Let's start by jumping on board with Graham Saunders in your Hydro Race Geodesic Racing number 100. He rides at the BMW Performance Driving School. Drive on the edge of physics and experience the ultimate rush. Visit bmwperformancecenter.com. Michael O'Brien carries with him ButtKicker. Sim racing is better with ButtKicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. Tyler Graf, then in the number 98 machine, has HyperX riding over his right shoulder. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. And last but not least, all in our GTP LMDH class, Alex Guyon rides with Next Level Racing. Take your racing to the next level. Visit nextlevelracing.com. Andrew, as we've already kind of talked about once or twice, the way that the limited fuel tanks are going to work in both classes, we expect them down onto pit lane at roughly the same time. Traffic is going to be the major talking point here today, with a smaller GTP class, LMDH class, and a bigger GT3 class. I'm excited for the chaos that's in store.
Absolutely. I think chaos is the operative word here, Arjuna. As you say, the fuel windows sort of converge for both the GT3s and the LMDHs, but then look at the lap times. It's basically 15 seconds a lap slower if you're a GT3 car. So that means that these prototypes, they're going to be catching up to the back of the GT3 field in less than 8 laps. So that's going to be some real traffic that these drivers are going to have to negotiate and deal with. And I think it's really going to factor into this 90-minute race that we have in front of us.
Well, one thing that we do have to consider, Andrew, is of course the fact that a lot of these drivers were competing in the iRacing 12 Hours of Sebring presented by VCO, and so they have a little bit of experience with that traffic management. It's something that we talk about a lot here on RaceSpotTV. You cannot practice traffic management in terms of going and doing it by yourself. You only do it by being in races and being out on the track with others.
Absolutely. There's nothing like having to let a driver by if you're a GT3 car while still trying to maintain your position in line and fight off the drivers that you're actually fighting with. Similarly, trying to pick your way through the traffic if you're an LMDH, there's nothing like it, and there's no possible way that you can simulate it other than just doing it in the real world or in real time in the race.
And one fun thing, again, I mentioned briefly at the start, Andrew, is we are going to have live race control for this one.
Yes, we are. We've got a couple of really talented race control drivers and race control stewards, and they're going to be very much looking to make sure that we have a nice, clean race here today, and they are not going to be hesitant to enforce the rules that we have to make sure that that happens.
One important point, when the green flag drops, it drops for both classes. There's no split class start. Sean Campbell, Miguel Vigo will be fighting into the final corner, with Vigo in second, running on the inside. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart, and this is the start of round 1 of your ButtKicker Sportscar Championship, presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. History will be made in 90 minutes time, with 2 winners on top here at the Sebring International Raceway. But we're ready to rumble for the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Sebring, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. We're racing for the very first time in the new era of multi-class Lionheart competition. Great start from Austin Young at the very front to lead the charge in towards turns 1, 2 and 3. Sean Campbell in GT3 is going to hold momentarily, but will have to defend from Miguel Vigo, as now the up and under from the Hydra Race geodesic machine. Fantastic start to the race, but GT3 sees the battle side by side at the front.
Wow, you almost don't know where to look in LMDH. We have a little bit of argy-bargy going on between Valiokas and I believe that's Graham Saunders, who had an amazing start there. And then GT3, there's no less excitement over there as well.
It was Vigo able to get past, bit of a slip up into the hairpin. David Suwa, Chris Fowler, they trip up over themselves. Campbell back to the inside in that tussle for the GT3 lead, as almost 3 wide into Cunningham corner. Plenty of action wherever you choose to look. Blocker has a little bit of a margin behind as Valiokas the cork in the bottle for your LMDH class, but look at them run down in towards Tower Corner. Meanwhile, still Vigo and Campbell side by side.
I'm fairly certain we've had 2x2 racing in both classes throughout most of the first half of this lap, and you almost can't get away with that here at Sebring. I don't know how we've been as clean as we have been for as long as we have, but it's been some really great action here to start this race.
Incredible stuff, and finally now a defined leader, although not maybe for very long, because Campbell immediately back to try and challenge side by side, and Campbell with the inside into Jean de Beyond Bend. We're only on lap number 1 of an estimated 50 or so. Campbell overcommits, Vigo slides on through. Ryan Otis sits in the catbird seat but doesn't choose to go for it as Miguel Vigo slides his way through Le Mans corner.
Oh, what a move from Vigo, and then he just makes the mistake, overcooks it, and he is sitting on the edge of the track there, and he's watching 30 GT3 cars stream by him, and it is just so painful, Arjuna.
Meanwhile, at the front, Austin Young will lead at the end of lap 1. He's broken away slightly with Adam Blocker in tow, but Valiokas, Lazier, Badefer, Kraus, and Saunders, they've all settled in for the time being, knowing that they probably got 5 or 6 laps before they catch up to the back of that GT3 train. And the first pass through traffic, Andrew, is always the most decisive.
It really is, and these drivers have so far done a really good job of finding that pass, finding that move, as we see a little bit of side-by-side action further back in the GT3 field there.
It's Callisto and it's Staples that are going to go side by side on that run out of towards turn number 5. Behind them, you've got Brian Bennett, Chase Wilson. This is all stacked up, and mentioned it when we were riding on board with Blocker. The hairpin, one of your best passing opportunities.
It absolutely is. This is the hardest braking zone on the circuit, and you need to be able to make a move here. But you can see that Staples is just really keeping that foot in it, and he's just able to keep that line going. And as the leader of the AM class right now, he's got Chase Wilson to think about as well behind him, so he can't afford to get too preoccupied here with Lionel Callisto.
Kite Bomber's back now slides his way down the LMDH field as Flynn Lazier jumps in front of Valiokas because of a slowdown penalty out of the penultimate corner. Valiokas slots into line in 5th as Phil Kraus now will try and chop and change and cut back underneath him, but one by one these LMDH drivers are starting to push the limits of the track. And Austin Young seems to be the respecter of no egos here. Lionheart debut, at least here in this LMDH class, and well, look at him storming away at the front.
Yeah, but Adam Blocker's trying to keep him honest the best he can. He's only 1.2 seconds back, which isn't too bad after three laps or so. If Adam Blocker can stay in that draft, he can definitely do something as the tires go off, because these cars and these tires do make a difference. And depending on how much you're pushing the car, it really will make a difference on the life of these tires.
Looking from up above through this hairpin, as that was a bit of a slip up further back in the train. I think it was Matt Taylor and Mike Rasmas. Still very much, though, all 18 cars in front of the GT3 field, which is a good thing to see. If we pop up the track map, you can see the leader filtering his way out of Tower Corner, and your GT3 leader just coming out of the Big Bend, or rather sweeping towards the Big Bend down and towards the hairpin. Sean Campbell is settled into line for the time being. We'll see if there is going to be any fuel-saving considerations up and down through the paddock. Here's a look at what happened, though, on the opening lap, and we'll start with what happened at the hairpin, because Chris Fowler, David Sirwa were at the very back of the field, and, well, Chris Fowler has the cursed usually on the side of his car. Maybe the brakes were a little bit cursed there.
Yeah, I think that was just a little bit of cold tires there on the opening lap. Just underestimated just how far he could go into that corner, as we see another replay here. Little bit of an incident all on their own there. I think it was
It was Luis Gonzalez Nunez who had started in
It
pit
was,
lane
yes.
and, well, out of the race instantly. Then for the GT3s into the hairpin, Gabe, whoa, that's just a big old checkup, and poor Gabe Wood has nothing he could really do there.
And that's so easy to happen on the first lap, Arjuna, especially into that hairpin, because you have such a big slowdown and we have such a big field. As we see another replay of the leading battle here, and it was a great move to get around the outside, and then he just overcooks it into the right-hander, and around she goes.
So that was a quick look at the various things that occurred on lap number 1, and outside of that, it's been relatively clean. Yes, we've seen the slowdown for Valiokas. Bomber's back, I think, had one of his own as well. Settled into a rhythm for the time being. Joshua Chin trying to look to the inside of Christopher Hill. This is the fight for 3rd, 4th, and 5th in GT3. Chin will squeeze to the inside, and in his home state race at the very least, is going to try and work his way forward into the fight for a podium.
A strong move there from Josh Chin. He's really putting the pressure on here, looking to move up in this field. Again, he didn't have necessarily the best qualifying effort, but Josh Chin, we know he's a real racer. He knows how to extract the most from the car over a longer stint, and especially from the fuel as well. So, a little bit of contact there, a little bit argy-bargy going there through turn 3.
I think Chris Hill tried to squeeze himself clear there, to be honest. Chin was alongside, had the right to be there, and is able to hold on, was the 101, but now it's Eric Staropoli, the independent driver, that will be on the back of Christopher Hill. Where are your split-ups in your GT3 field? Realistically, there aren't too many of them. Between 12th and 13th, there's a couple of seconds. 7th and 8th, there's 3 seconds. But as I mentioned before, it's that first pass through traffic that is always the most difficult for both classes, if we're being fair, and so it'll be interesting to see how it's all going to go for them. Gail Vigo's got a hell of a recovery drive on his agenda for the rest of the day. He's just got past George Anzaldo up to 26th position.
He's got it all to do in front of him, but we've seen just how fast Vigo can be, and the important thing for him now is no more mistakes. He's made his one mistake, and it's cost him dearly. He cannot afford to make another mistake, and it's so easy to make a mistake as you're trying to get your way through this field, especially in and around drivers that you may feel like you're much, much faster than.
I mean, in this case, let's just be real, that he will be faster than them. That's why we have the Pro and the Am split, just like they have in the real world as well. I really enjoy it. Let drivers be on track in the same field fighting for the same positions in terms of track position, but you get to be scored amongst those that maybe you're able to compete with more regularly on a week-by-week basis. I wouldn't be shocked if we see an Am driver come out on top overall through the course of the season as well at the end of the day. It could work in the reverse direction as well, but just look how Vigo set that one up out of Le Mans on the run down into the Ullman straightaway, and it should be nice and easy for him to now to get by Eliza Indrani in the 205 Simrace 24/7 Academy entry. Sean Campbell trying to break away at the front. We tend to talk about draft being somewhat important in the GT3 cars. Well, iRacing decided a couple of weeks ago, Andrew, that was not to be the case anymore.
Yeah, a little bit of an update, a little bit of a curveball thrown to all these GT3 drivers, and suddenly we don't have quite as strong a draft in the GT3 class as we did before. But that being said, Ryan Otis is using what is left of the GT3 draft to great effect, and he is keeping Sean Campbell honest, much the same way that Adam Blocker is keeping the leader of our LMDH field honest as well. So we've got a really nice sort of variety of teams and drivers here at the front of this field. We've got Lionheart veterans like Ryan Otis, surrounding newer comers like Sean Campbell and Carlos Vila as well. So really interesting to see how this is shaking out so far, Arjuna.
Again, remember that expecting both classes likely in around the same window on pit lane. GTP's LMDH is looking at 18 to 19 laps. The GT3 is looking at between 16 to 17 laps. In terms of the actual fuel limit, it's 50% if you're curious, 60 liters in the LMDH car, in the GT3 cars, excuse me. It's like 85% for your LMDH entries. Front of the field, though, Adam Blocker, not sure what's happened to him. He's down in 9th now.
Yeah, there was a mistake from Adam Blocker, I think, and it's really put him behind the 8 ball. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it was definitely earlier on in this lap here, Arjuna.
See if we can grab a look at it. Not be shocked if it's traffic related because, again, first time through that's the most congested. Austin Young seems to have done a great job of staying out of trouble. Adam Blocker's car looks clear, I think, which is the important thing. At the very least, he hasn't taken on damage through whatever had befallen him. See if we can pick up a RaceSpotTV replay, because it is all-seeing and ever-present as Adam Blocker dives to the inside. And what was I saying about difficulties with the rear locking up in these machines? Blocker shows us that perfectly.
And it's so easy to do with these hybrid systems because of the regen, and you can see just how high a commitment level he had to try to get around that GT3 car. Probably just got in a little bit deep there, tried to hit the brakes, and with the brake bias the way it was, just spun just as quickly as you saw there.
Whoa! As that's Nate Siefker, who's done something that I've not seen, that I've seen a couple of times here over the last couple of weeks at Sebring, so that's not unexpected. And then Michael O'Brien in the Graphics LC entry is going to try and go 3 wide in the middle. And now which one of the Hydro Race entries was that, as that's a hellacious incident on pit entry? Was that Miguel Vigo again? It was!
That was Vigo again. The day has gone from bad to worse for Vigo, and it's so easy to happen. This was no fault of Vigo's. Vigo was holding the inside line there, and I think O'Brien just got a little bit spooked by the GT3 car on the outside, and he just collected Vigo. Nowhere for them to go, and it was lucky that wasn't a bigger incident when O'Brien went back across the track there, Archer.
Oh, as Flynn Lazier to the inside of one of those AM machines. That's really going to now check everyone up. It was the 43 that really got squeezed. Chris Staples, leader in AM, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and well, you're not wrong. I think Vigo, not much he could do there. O'Brien could have maybe run a little bit wider out, but that's going to be, at the very least, I think 5 retirements rather, to kick off this race.
Yeah, we've also had Alex Guyon retire off screen as well, so that is another LMDH car off. But you can see just the amount of chaos that is going on here, Arjun. It's almost hard to keep up with everything that's going on. And Flynn Lazier has gotten by John Betafor. As we see a little bit, that's a GT3 car going slowly there. I'm wondering if there was a little bit of contact. And there's an LMDH car with a little bit of nose damage as well.
So it's Lionel Callisto. That's... Oh, well... Was that with Chris Staples?
That was with Chris Staples.
And so this is the danger of the AM and Pro interaction, I guess, right? Because Lionel Callisto is not an AM. Chris Staples is and was leading in the class. And so Callisto may be feeling the pressure of some of the GTP LMDH traffic from behind. And Chris Staples, fortunately, not losing out too much as a result.
And it's just so difficult sometimes when you're a GT3 driver to be able to look in your mirror and keep track of where the LMDH traffic is coming from, while at the same time you're having to race wheel to wheel with your competitors in the GT3 class. And I think that maybe Callisto just got in there a little bit too deep, didn't know exactly where Staples was, and got into the back of him. As we see Sanders getting a little bit blocked there by a GT3 car as he's trying to keep pace here with Phil Krause, who's up to 5th place in the LMDH class.
Yeah, there's a couple of trains that are starting to build all over the track. But as expected, it really has been this first cycle through that has splintered them up the most. You know who's cleared out the most of them all, though? I mean, hop, skipping away, Austin Young. 7 seconds clear as we get ready to finish lap number 8.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have a lead like this early on in a race, then you're just able to compound that. You're able to get through it like a hot knife through butter, whereas everyone else is sort of has one eye on their competitors behind them. Austin Young has been able to just focus forward, and he has opened up an incredible gap over Flynn Lazier in second.
Let's talk a little bit about what happened this past weekend, because it was at least better news for Adam Blocker, who's already had some struggles today. But Adam Blocker is now known as Great Job on national television after Blocker secured his first win in the NTT IndyCar Series, part of the crew on Team Penske's number 2 for Joseph Newgarden, and he got his 2 minutes, or 2 seconds rather, on NBC, and 2 words that will live on in infamy, Andrew.
Absolutely, and it's great to see Adam having that success in the real world. He's worked so hard to get to where he is. He, of course, was on Callum Ilot's car for Kumko's Hollinger Racing last year, and he's moved over to the number 2 in Team Penske this year, and he's really acquitted himself well, of course. The Texas race did go much better for the engine in the number 2 car than St. Pete did.
We weren't meant to talk about that one, though. Yeah, that's why there was no burnouts apparently as well. But yes. Speaking of burnouts, I think we can already maybe get burnouts fitted for the front straight and Sean Campbell, because I tell you what, 4 seconds clear in the GT3 class after how close it was with Rhino just even after Miguel Vigo had his slip up. I think it goes to show the speed that this man has. 1:59.975 is his fastest lap of the race. No one else in the GT3 field has been able to get below a 2:02 in this race.
Yeah, Sean Campbell really is a pro at this type of racing, and he knows exactly what to do. He knows, more importantly, how to let those GTPs by, and I think that's one of the things that some of the Lionheart drivers are going to have to learn from these interlopers, is just when to let the traffic by, or conversely, if you're in the LMDH class, how to get by these GT3 cars. And having that experience, there's nothing that parallels it. You can practice all you want, but you have to get into a race and see what happens. So I think we're seeing a lot of drivers getting an education in a hurry here today, Arjuna.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's going to be not just about them learning how to let the cars go, but also learning about, okay, this driver likes to do this driver likes to do this, because that's also something that's important. I've gotten in trouble before in some various top-level endurance series for my Twitch streams, where cars in a faster class did rude things to me. I got very angry and shouted things about how I was going to crash them the next time they came and lapped me. And then I get out of the car, and 5 minutes later I get a message from the other driver saying, "Oh, why do you say that things about me?"
And it's just one of those things where it's really hard when you're that much faster or that much slower than the other driver to really understand what they're doing. But the thing is, both drivers see what they're doing is so logical at the time that you really sometimes need to just like have those cooler heads prevail. But in the heat of competition, those cooler heads are few and far between.
Absolutely. And I wonder how many are going to have actual spotters for this series. You know, we'd often talk about spotters for things like open wheel competitions and the various Triple Crowns that would happen, for an example. But spotters, maybe not as important in sports car racing, but somewhere like Daytona, for example, spotters definitely are something that the teams will rely on. Not to the same extent, though, as I think we do up in oval racing. Checking up with the final step of the podium and the train that has started to build behind. John Bader for now is followed by the likes of Marius Valiokis, Phil Kraus, and Graham Saunders. They got 1.5 seconds back to Caleb Bensi before Adam Blocker will try and work his way back forward after dropping 5 positions. But look at how Phil Kraus is just working on the back of the race clutch machine in front of him.
This is a little bit of typical Phil Kraus, isn't it? He's just very tidy. He's not getting too overly excited at this point in the race. He knows there's a long way still to go. We still have an hour and 10 minutes remaining in this race, so there's a lot of time here for Phil Kraus to move forward, and he's just sort of tidily following along here behind Valiokis. And you can tell Valiokis is really pushing to try and stay ahead of the number 91 cars. You can see just how deep Phil Kraus can go on the brakes, and that is typical not only of his style here, but in the open wheel car as well.
Yeah, I just get nervous knowing that these cars are so sensitive at the rear that if you get that close, it might be an issue. Up and onto the curb is Christopher Hill in his quest to get past Carlos Villa, but that's not going to happen as they funnel out of turn number 5. But an opportunity up into the hairpin if Hill can maybe switch back on the Geodesic Racing Black and Gold BMW, but no, Hill's going to be well and truly committed all the way the long way around. Coming and closing from behind at a rate of knots was Eric Staropoli, who did a 2:00.920 last time by, closed half a second on that number 46 machine.
This is the really close action that the GT3 can produce. You can see just how much these cars love to go side by side throughout multiple corners, and Hill and Villa are not letting each other go, and they're not giving each other very much space, but just enough space to get through these corners. One of these times, I think Hill is going to be able to pull off this over-under maneuver that he's been trying to set up, but it just hasn't happened so far.
It's really, though, costing them time, more up to those up front than anything else. In both now, the LMDH and in your GT3 field, we're seeing big breakaways at the front. Hill through, Villa flashes the light. the universal sign of frustration from race car drivers around the world. This a fight that I'm sure is only set to intensify even further, but side by side off the hairpin, Phil Kraus trying to get the move done on the race clutch entry, of Valiokas. An opportunity presented for Graham Saunders to try and take it 3 wide into Cunningham, as Phil Kraus, the long way around, is going to try and get it done.
Wow, look at that move from Kraus, but Valiokas is having none of it. They're still going side by side in the tower, and Phil Kraus is going to have to be the one to blink, and this could just open up the door for Graham Saunders on Phil Kraus. Kraus with the amazing late braking maneuver down there into those corners there. He almost looked like he had it pulled off, but Valiokas has just valiantly fought back there.
That was incredible. Ben C is about to join the fun as well in the number 29 race first entry, but early days. You can see they're going to be filtered right back into traffic in a moment as well. It's going to start getting physical, I think, for some of these cars. It looked like Flynn Lazier having to dive to the inside of a GT3, who did have to take avoiding action as a result of that. Flynn Lazier running quite well right now. He's up in second spot as Austin Young. You can see a bit of a kick up at the turn 1 complex as Gabe Wood and now Craig Forsyth will duke it out as a result, but it's a little less frenetic this time through the traffic.
Yeah, just a little bit more separation between the battles. It is still fairly tight when you get into a battle like this where you have 4 cars trying to fight for position, then you have a GTP coming through and trying to negotiate all 4 at once. But then you have the little bit of respite that you get between the different battles, and you see Austin Young has been able to just negotiate that so well. But here's the battle again between Valiokas and Kraus. Kraus is just not letting Valiokas get away at all. And I wouldn't be surprised here if we saw another move coming from Kraus in the next few corners.
See if it's going to be sent out of tower. I think it's going to be really about the momentum that they're getting through traffic. That's not going to help the cause, that's for sure. And into the inside, not necessarily a passing opportunity as tower corner. And Phil Kraus, I think all he's done is just checked himself up. And Graham Saunders maybe will try and use a little bit more of the hybrid spool as they funnel into Jean-de-Beyond for what will be the 13th time this race, with traffic in front of them to consider as well. And Kraus is going to get blocked off now, unfortunately. This is the danger that sometimes you have, and Graham Saunders takes perfect advantage of it, but meanwhile, sailing on clear in front of them, Valiokas 2 seconds in front.
Yeah, and just like that, they've lost that much time, and Bensi is also looking there, and you saw just how much that Saunders got checked up there, and then Kraus very deep into Sunset Bend, trying the over-under. Wow, this is some tight racing here for 5th and 6th in the LMDH class.
And we probably got about 7 or so minutes before we're into the pit stop window, so let's get excited for the first pit stops of this ButtKicker Sports Car Championship, looking rearwards off the shoulder effectively here of Graham Saunders. I tell you what, Andrew, I knew this was going to be a lot of fun, but yeah, at this rate, we're not going to end up with voices at the end of the season. As that was Clinton Martin that was escorted wide in the number 49.
Yeah, and it's gone from bad to worse as he spun back across the track, and he's basically put his car in a very difficult spot to recover from Arjuna, so he's going to lose at least 10 or 15 seconds here.
And it was all in front of this fight that was for 20th and is now for 19th. There's Kalisto as he tries to recover his way on forward. One thing that I want to phrase this in the right way to consider as well is that I mentioned earlier that traffic management is something that you practice and you get your chops, your reps in out on track, right? The experience that you have, though, dictates the way that you think and judge other people and your moves in traffic. And so for someone like Blocker, for Vigo, for Saunders, Valiokas, Beta, these are drivers that, again, we've seen in top split iRacing special events where, let's be real, Andrew, traffic management is brutal at its kindest. Now, a lot of these other drivers that maybe are more Lionheart regulars that do the special events for fun, maybe they have a more relaxed time with traffic. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when they get thrown a move to the inside from out of nowhere.
Absolutely, and the major thing, I think, Arjuna, that separates the drivers that you mentioned from sort of the Lionheart regulars is the top drivers. They really understand that a move in IndyCar can be 1 or 2 corners ahead of time. You set it up. In the LMDH class here, it's going to be 4 or 5 corners because you have to be cognizant at all times when you're coming up to a GT3 car and where you're potentially going to catch them. And you almost have to manipulate the gaps to the cars in front of you and behind you to set up the perfect passing zones. And when you saw that with Graham Saunders and Phil Krause, they lost almost 2 seconds to Valiokis, and they're slowly catching him back up again, but it's taken them 2 or 3 laps simply because Valiokis was able to time that pass of the GT3 cars better than they were.
The nuances of traffic are something that you can never perfect. The traffic will give and the traffic will take, and you cannot expect to be perfect through it. Drew White will be hoping that he doesn't get escorted wide once again, as I think he has just done there. Baedefer has just been caught by Valiokis, and now we're going to have the scramble for third resume once again. Bensi has lost out slightly in this entire sequence that we've seen. Let's go ahead and try and pick up some replays, and we'll start with solving the mystery of what happened to Clint Martin in the Scoers entry.
Yeah, it was just got a little bit spooked there. I think that was Graham Saunders on his inside, and he just went a little bit wide there, gave him a little bit too much respect. As a GT3 car, it's a really fine line trying to give as much lane as you can to the drivers coming by, but at the same time, you can't afford to compromise yourself and spin across like Clint Martin did, as we see another replay here. I'm not quite sure what happened here. It just looks like the driver just kind of pulled off there. I'm not sure what happened, Arjun.
Yeah, I think that was Sam Crow. Not sure what happened. There was Drew White in the background that we saw. Now, ooh, that's Chris Fowler up the inside, and it's a bit late through the corner. We'll get a look from up above.
Yeah, it is late. This is one of those situations where there's a little bit of miscommunication where I think the GT3 car was saying, come on through, and then Chris Fowler wasn't sure whether he was going to, and then it just ended up being sort of more of a dive bomb, I think, than they were hoping for. But we have our first real pit stop happening. That's Carlos Villa in the Geodesic Racing car here.
And he did see him go up on the jack, so he did take tires, but with a 22.4 second pit stop, he did definitely not take 4 tires. I can guarantee you of that. He's going to emerge right behind this monumental tussle that they seem to be having for 18th position, with Gabe Wood, Forsyth, Kalisto all still mixed up in this one. And this is the danger of sometimes trying an undercut in a field as big as this. You get spat back out into some of that traffic that you maybe were trying not to get mixed up with, but Villa had been dropping like a rock. The gap between Staropoli and Christopher Hill is now 3 full seconds, and of course let's not forget that Christopher Hill had to work pretty hard to get past the 46 initially.
And let's not overlook the fact that the GT3 tires especially, they wear a lot more than they used to in this sim. At one point, you could double, triple, even quadruple stint the tires in the GT3 cars. Not anymore. You very much do need to take tires, and that is going to be a part of the strategy that goes on here. So I think Villa, he just used up his tires just a little bit too much in that opening stint, and it caused him to have to take that early stop.
So we have 17 laps now on the boards for your LMDHs, so probably a lap or so away from seeing them down to pit lane. As Sean Campbell, we ride on board with your GT3 race leader, Phil Krause, up the inside of him, but Campbell a while ahead, no major drama for him. Lap 15 for your GT3, so what did we say, Andrew? We expect them in basically at the same time, and well, give it about 60 seconds and it's going to be one busy old pit lane.
It absolutely is, Arjuna. I think we're going to see at least probably a third of your LMDH field and a third of your GT3 field down pit lane this time by. But of course, we are right around that 1 hour mark as well. So that's right on that 30-minute time spot that we're looking at. So anyone who can have that extra lap, maybe even that extra 2 laps here, that can really come back towards the end of this race, where you're only going to look at maybe a 20-minute stint to end this race.
Haven't really talked too much about the conditions since the start, so let's talk about that very quickly. It's come down slightly as we ticked past 5 p.m. in virtual standard time. Interestingly, someone in the YouTube chat out of the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing Camp says you can do 4 tires in 22 seconds for the GT3 class, and so even though it is not a full tank of fuel that goes into it, it's probably around just under half the tank. Does mean that, sounds like Carlos Villa struggling on the tires is going to have a bit of respite. The one thing to remember is, oh, it's Joshua Chin. He hasn't lost it on pit entry. He's lost it through Jean de Bion.
And we've seen this a couple of times already, and I think Josh Chin, again, he just overcooked it through that complex there, and he was letting by that, looks like Alexander Van de Sant, and he gets in a little bit too much, hits the curb, and we've seen it so many times, haven't we, Arjuna?
And he's just minding his business. Look how close to the grass he runs on the entry into the corner initially, and once it goes, and fortunately, the bonk into the wall is about as minor as you can get in these GT3 machines. Chin holds on to 4th position, still in contention for a podium finish. Tyler Graf, he's next into pit lane and also going up on the jacks in the Graphics LC number 98 machine. We'll get a good sense now of what the LMDH pit stops are going to be like. Meanwhile, through all of this, by the way, as we expect them in maybe this time by in GT3, Sean Campbell now leads by 13 seconds.
It's been a clinic at the front from Sean Campbell, and one of the things I was looking at while we were on board with him a little bit earlier is just how much he was respecting the LMDHs, but still taking his own lines through these corners. You can really see that he's not afraid to own the corner, and that's one of the qualities that you need to have as a GT3 driver. You do have to respect that the LMDHs are coming through and they're faster than you, but you have to be able to run your lines and know when to take the corner and when not to, and Sean Campbell has been doing an excellent job at that so far.
Remember, RaceSpot.tv /timing. You can follow along. Look on pit lane. Busy time for your GT3s as the likes of James Paulson, Dustin Wardlow, Herrick, White, Wood, they all begin to roll. Andrew Marquez has already set himself clear at the very tippy top of that row of drivers as they filter off a pit lane. All of a sudden, it got dark here at Sebring. The clouds have covered the track, and maybe ominous signs as we get set for this very busy period of the race. Your LMDH leader is getting through the traffic into the hairpin. Now, will Sean Campbell on lap 16? Surely not. He's going to go at least one more. The longer they can go each of these stints, Andrew, the less amount of fuel they'll need in that next stop.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge advantage to be able to have that shorter stint at the end of this race. Yes, you can get a little bit of an undercut if you get into clean air, and that is a consideration, but at the same time, having that stint at the end being as short as possible, being on the freshest tires as possible, and the lowest fuel possible, that's going to be huge, especially in a situation like this where we are starting to get a little bit closer to the end of the evening. The temperatures are going to be dropping, the tires are going to be holding on even better as this race unfolds. So I think that having that long stint here is really the smart move.
Adam Blocker has been unable to make any headway in his recovery drive after his issue on the brakes. He is not the first driver to have that issue. He will not be the last driver, I can guarantee you that. Extra busy pit lane, though, for GT3s, with only Sean Campbell and Josh Chin able to extend past lap number 16. It's going to be Ryan Otis with a 23.7 second stop that is among the longest of them all, with other drivers trying to be a little bit more equal in how they split the fuel. Christopher Hill, Matthew Morhart, Eric Staropoli, Carlos Villa, and Brian Bennett are going to be those that filter out of pit lane, although Carlos Villa now with a great undercut is actually going to jump in front of the likes of Morhart once again as GTPs filter their way into the pit lane as the GT3s continue to roll off.
And this is the chaos that we were talking about. Look at the drivers coming and going through that pit lane. All of the prototypes are down pit lane, barring just a few here. Adam Blocker, I think once he made that mistake, he's one of the drivers who's extending here. So is Kraus, Valiokas, and Young. And are we surprised, Arjun, that Josh Chin and Sean Campbell are the two GT3s that went the longest here?
Yeah, not shocked in the case of Josh Chin. As I mentioned, I've done races with him where he's gone like 3 or 4 laps longer than me, and I've gone, bro, what? To be fair, it does not always mean that it was a faster strategy, Andrew, but he could save the fuel at the very least, as I think Mike Rasmas, our Lionheart Retro Series champion in 2022.
Oh, and we had a mistake here.
Who else has had a mistake?
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the...
you got me confused. I was like, something else must have happened. I must have missed something. Race off of pit road sees Flynn Lazier in front of Beta first, Saunders, Bensi, Rolf, but now, of course, still waiting for 6 to come down to pit lane.
And this is the chaotic time as well, Arjun, isn't it? Where you're always just sort of trying to figure out what everyone else is doing. This is the first indication of who is actually doing the fuel saving, and is that not a mirror image of what happened to Adam Blocker earlier in this race?
But I tell you what, the way it pitches around, that's like a yo-yo right there. Like, once it gets on the curb, it just like hooks itself even deeper.
Well, you can tell that basically the rear axle just locks because of that regenerative braking. As soon as the tires lock up, it just immediately locks and spins the car around. There's nothing that you can do at that point.
But here we go. End of the pit cycle, because we're going to see Young, Valiokas, Kraus, Blocker, and Bombers back Razmas all down onto the safety of the pit lane. And it's going to be an exciting merge for them as well. Not really too many changes inside of your... Ooh, it's Graham Saunders has just taken a toe back to pit.
Kraus missed his pit box as well, sorry.
No, Kraus did miss his pit box, but Graham Saunders, well, his race has come to a close. Not sure what's happened to him. He's already looking a bit tentative. I think there was an issue getting fuel into his car. It's not uncommon, it's not unheard of, and Graham Saunders, well, what a terrible way to start off a campaign.
Oh no, and so iRacing in the latest update has put in some auto fueling logic into the sim, but it's also wreaked havoc with some of the more established tools. And I think that might have been what happened here with Graham Saunders, is he maybe relying on a crew chief sort of app to help him, and sometimes those can just malfunction and not fuel your car at all, and I think that's exactly what's happened to Graham Saunders here.
Well, sometimes, unfortunately, it's even worse than that, and literally just will not put fuel in the car. I've seen that a few more times than I'd like, but see if we can get word from the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing number 100 at some point, and it'll be an interesting conversation, to say the very least. It's now 11 and a bit seconds is what I was trying to say, between your race leader and the queue that now runs for second. It's Valiokas, Lazier, Kraus. So Lazier with a bit of a longer stop, trying to put a bit more fuel in his car, or maybe have a shorter pit stop come the end of the race. But yeah,
but there has been that swap there though with Valiokas and Lazier, and I think that, as you say, that little bit of a longer fuel load also means that Lazier has got a little bit of a heavier car right now, and that's not only allowed Valiokas in front of him, but it's also put him back into the clutches of Phil Kraus, who is on the recovery drive and has gotten back around John Betafer as well.
But they are realistically just fighting for second at this point, unless Austin Young.
They are right. Yeah, they are right now, but you never know in this type of racing, Arjuna, what can happen, as we've seen so many times. In endurance racing with multi-class racing, there is never a safe lead.
Yeah, unless Austin Young is going to lock up the rear brakes, the way that he's driving right now, I think he's looking in a pretty secure spot to just consistently ride through traffic in the same manner of speaking. Kraus closes up with a great rate of knots to Flynn Lazier. These two used to be former teammates, if I'm not mistaken, or did their time not overlap at one of their previous teams?
I don't believe their times overlapped. Flynn is with the Indy Alliance Racing, I believe.
Now he is, but...
now he is, yeah.
Yeah, this would have been back in the LLM days for the good old Phil Kraus, but maybe we'll ask him at the end. Onto the brakes, into the hairpin, just backing it up a little bit as well. Not trying to get too close. Trying to protect from Betafer behind. Menzies is the real loser in all of that, though, and I don't think that was necessarily even because, yes, he did have a longer pit stop, but I think he just lost out more with the traffic than anything.
Yeah, one of the things is coming out on those new tires, you really have to be able to get those tires up and fired up well. And when you're trying to do that as you're negotiating traffic, it can really cost you a lot of time. And I think that's what's happened to Bensi and to a lesser extent Adam Blocker as well. Because Blocker is still a further 4 seconds behind Bensi. And before the pit stops, if I'm not mistaken, he was much closer to Bensi.
Yeah, but Blocker did put 27 seconds in as well. So I think they're just trying to be a little bit similar in terms of fuel. Let's talk about Alexander Van der Sent, though. He's inside the top 10, and he is our BMW M Performance Driving School driver profile. These are his stats from the IndyCar, the Lionheart Open Wheel Series, to give it its new name. 23 starts after he debuted at the end of 2021 in explosive fashion at Auto Club. Ended up on the podium there. His first victory at Watkins Glen was one that will live on in the history books for a while because of the way that he took the challenge to the man of 2022, Phil Kraus, and beat him at his own game.
Absolutely. It was one of the few sort of off races for Phil Kraus, if you could call it that. He only finished in second place in that race as opposed to his usual first spot. And Van de Sant really did master the strategy and mastered the car as well around Watkins Glen. But here today, I don't think Van de Sant has really quite settled into this car, this setup, the way he was hoping to. I know before the race, as we see him run just a little bit wide through turn one there, he was talking with a little bit of confidence, but also a little bit of trepidation just about the setup. It's a tricky setup that they have for these LMDH cars here today. And I think it's just not suited to Van de Sant right now.
I think that's one thing that they're all going to have to get used to, in that the Lara IR18, they did enjoy the benefit of the in-car tools recently, but they're going to have to get used to the old school. It's all done with your two hands and your 2 feet. What happens to Eliza Indranini, whose name I'm going to have to make sure I get right for the next broadcast. Ooh, just a little bit wide through Le Mans, off into the grass, and then for a trip into the tire wall as well. Phil Kraus, by the way, gets past Flynn Lazier for third.
Yeah, and that's really important there for Kraus. He needs to be able to keep Lazier at bay here if he wants to take the fight to Valiokis. And it's important to note, Arjuna, Young... Whoa, that was a little bit of a forearm shiver there to Lazier. Lazier trying to come back on Kraus, but it's not going to happen here as they negotiate more traffic and put Lazier back into the clutches of John Betafor. But what I was about to say is Valiokis has started to reel in the gap, or at least stop the bleeding to Adam Young up front, and it's down to 7 seconds back to Valiokis and just ticking over into that 6-second bracket. So
Young has had a few awful laps in traffic, and to describe how awful they have been, well, we'll use the graphic that does not get enough love here on RaceSpotTV. It is the beautiful lap chart graphic. Look at that since he's come out of pit stops. 146, 147s. That's all after being effectively, when he wasn't in traffic, in the 44s before. The traffic gives and the traffic takes. It's taken from the race leader.
And again, part of that is what I was talking about a little bit earlier with that firing up of those tires. It's really important to get them up to temperature as quickly as you possibly can. And you look at how Valiokis has done that with the 44.7 and the 44.4s. He's really starting to turn up the wick from what he was doing before. And he's even starting to run away here from Kraus and Lazier and Betafor. And I expect Kraus as well to start turning up the wick in pursuit of Valiokis now that he's gotten around Flynn Lazier.
I think it was all about the fighting, though. Let's take a look at how this all started, by the way. In towards Le Mans corner, Kraus sends it up the inside, and then kind of tried to use the traffic initially as a pit gave enough room very kindly to Flynn Lazier. Good racecraft overall from both drivers. I really just wanted to take another look at whether there was contact. There was definitely contact.
Yeah, but fortunately it was just the slightest of contacts rather than a forearm shiver right into the outside wall there, as it so easily could be through that Sunset Bend complex. So it could have been worse, but at the same time, if you're Flynn Lazier, you're probably not appreciative of just how aggressive Phil Kraus was. But they were clean for so far before that as well, so that was really overall good racing.
Sometimes it happens. On board with Dustin Wardlow in a 3-car squabble over 11th as Chris Reagan runs himself. And now, I think he's going to be, what, second or third in the AM class, because you've got Staples. He'll be third because you've got Staples and Wilson in front, and then the rest are pros up the road. But it's interesting to track the format of the quote-unquote AMs. And, of course, we'll follow that storyline over the course of the season. Adam Blocker, last time by, did a 45.7. I'm just trying to also monitor lap times, Andrew, between the LMDHs that took on a little bit more fuel versus those that did not, because I'm very curious. Austin Young, if you were curious last time by, 44.2, back on the pace.
Yeah, it's right back to where he was hoping to be. So, again, I think it was just bad luck with the traffic. And as you say, the traffic gives and the traffic takes away, and the gap has stabilized. But the important thing, I think, for me, though, is that Valiokis has really started to stabilize that gap. and setting him up well for the second half of the race.
Well, we are officially getting to the halfway point of the first round of the ButtKicker Sportscar Championship presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. It's been a blitz at the start from Austin Young and Sean Campbell, but in the LMDHs, it's starting to be closed by Valiokas in the track behind. Sean Campbell runs clear at the front of the GT3 field. Don't go anywhere on RaceSpotTV. We'll be right back with the run to the checkered flag here from the Sebring International Raceway. Welcome back to the first round of the ButtKicker Sportscar Championship presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. We've headed to the Sunshine State and the bumpy Sebring International Raceway to kick things off with the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Sebring. Hello everyone and welcome back to RaceSpotTV, where my name is Arjuna Kankipati, joined in the RaceSpot commentary booth by the one and only Andrew Kinsella. Don't forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading to RaceSpot.tv/timing to find your favorite team and driver. We're past the halfway point of the race, still with one pit stop cycle left to go, and they're still out of the 48 cars that saw the green flag, 42 left running, and the Sebring International Raceway is as busy as it's ever been, Andrew.
It has been, and unfortunately for Adam Young, he's been a victim of that busyness for a little bit longer, because it is down to 5.7 seconds to Marius Valiokas. Valiokas has done a really good job of negotiating this traffic, and he's distanced himself from Phil Krause and is closing up on the leader of this race.
Doesn't help when Lazier and Baedefer are basically trying to bait each other into a who will not blink sort of a battle. Lazier gets the best of it for the time being in the Penguin RC entry, but my word, what a fascinating tussle it has been so far. Let's give you the rundown of how they stand in the classes then, with 10 minutes to go until we'll head into that final pit stop cycle. Austin Young in the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing entry has been very, very patient with the traffic. Built up at one point a 12-second advantage, but now just leads by 5.5 seconds over the charging Marius Valiokas, who represents Race Clutch here in this 2023 ButtKicker Sports Car Championship. Behind them, it's that tussle between Phil Krause and Flynn Lazier for third and fourth positions. They find themselves about 4 seconds off the back of second spot, while John Baedefer is going to be next in line to make his challenge on Lazier in fourth. Caleb Benzie took as much fuel as he could throw onto the car in the cycle of pit stops. He's running by himself for the time being, trying to stay clear of Adam Blocker in the Powerslide Motorsports number 74, who threw his car off the road under braking in towards turn number 3. Barrett Rolfe in the Tiger Hawk Simsport car, he was running in 8th position in the number 33, while Tyler Grafs in the Graphics LC number 98 runs in 9th. Alexander Van der Sant will complete your top 10. We're running down through the GT3s very quickly, and it's been domination station from Sean Campbell, who is a full 18.5 seconds clear of Ryan Otis, who does look as though he'll look like a strong championship hopeful if he can stay out of trouble, if he can keep this momentum going as well. Christopher Hill in the Team Watson Racing car has been one of the bright shining stars on debut to the Lionheart Racing Series, and he runs in front of Joshua Chin by just about 2 seconds as the private label Team Hype and the Florida native Joshua Chin tries to get back up to a podium of his own. Carlos Villa pitted earliest of them all, and we expect him down into pit lane in a handful of laps. See how he deals with shedding off the tires, but he's not that far in front of Matthew Morhart or Eric Staropoli, who are trying to chase him down. They are clear of Brian Bennett in the Synergy Motorsports 161. We have GT3 Pro, but we also have GT3M, and the leader of your amateur drivers is going to be Chase Wilson in that number 13 Twisted Motorsports car. Chris Staples, the independent driver, completes your top 10, completes the top 2 as well in that AM category. Andrew, it's been an intense start to the race, and it is just starting to settle down.
Yeah, we're right at that stage of the race, Arjuna, where everyone's sort of falling into a little bit of a rhythm. There's a little bit more separation between the different cars in the classes. So the LMDH cars are really able to negotiate the drivers in the GT3s a little bit more fluidly. But that being said, there's still a lot of jostling for position happening over the course of this stint, because you really need to set yourself up for success for the final stint. And we just had a little bit of action here with Flynn Lazier. He's finally been able to get a little bit of separation here from John Betafer.
Tyler Graf has slipped up, and so I have a feeling that we'll be checking out what happened to him in a few moments' time. But traffic a bit of a real reality now, and a constant reality for plenty of these drivers. Let's take a look at our RaceSpotTV replay machine that caught a moment between George Anzaldo and Gabe Wood. And Anzaldo going to run himself out wide and off and into the grass, but it was actually going to be Gabe Wood that would get the worst of it. Then into turn 1 next time by. Looks like right side's on the grass, and does a nice old drift into the wall.
And that's going to result in some suspension damage for Gabe Wood, and unfortunately I think that's going to be day done for him. Meanwhile, we've got another GT driver, I believe that's Mike Rigney, going a little bit deep into the hairpin, and that's going to be a long way back onto the racetrack for Mike Rigney. Meanwhile, Tyler Graf, this is what happened to him. He went too deep, and I think he just about keeps it out of the tire wall, maybe a little bit of a kiss, but it's going to be at least 5 or 10 seconds lost for Tyler Graf there.
I get the feeling like Austin Young has continued to suffer in the traffic. There's a look at the lap times. Steadied out a little bit, but it's just not been as rock steady as it was in the first 30-odd minutes of the race. It does feel as though we're going to filter most of these races, Andrew, into thirds. The first third, the second third, and the third third, all divided, of course, by pit stops.
The third, I like that, Arjun.
It's so obvious as well. I feel so silly.
The thing I think for Austin Young, though, is that you really do see Marius Valiokis there in the background of that picture, having them on the same straightaway. That's going to be just a psychological effect for Valiokis. He can see Young in the foreground of his screen now, so he can start really hunting down that number 11 leader. And I don't think that this is going to be quite the cakewalk that Young was hoping it would be at the beginning of this race.
Oh, Bomber's back! And Tyler Graf have come together, as that was Tyler Graf trying to gather himself up, and he's got significant damage on the right side of his machine as well. So he's, I think, surely going to owe us a trip down towards the pit lane. We go straight to take a look at what happened, and it was a lock-up into the braking zone all of its own. And I'll be honest, with similar liveries, first race of the season, I'm not sure who was who, but that looks about pretty slam dunk as to whose fault it was. It was the 37, so it would have been Kite Bombers back, unfortunately.
And there's just another case of that rear brake locking up, and it's so easy to do in these LMDH cars. And Tyler Graf was just an innocent victim there, Arjuna.
So still looking at a 5-second lead for Austin Young, but it is starting to close on down. Now down to 5.3. Bit by bit, it's being ticked away. I tell you who's been slowly chipping away as well is Joshua Chin. We saw Chris Hill being a pretty feisty competitor in the early stages, and I don't think he's going to give this podium spot up without too much of a squabble, but Joshua Chin is going to be more than up for the challenge.
As we see Flynn Lazier diving down to the inside of the number 73 of Josh Chin. Chin, I think he did already make one pass on Hill, but unfortunately he did make that mistake earlier on, and that's put him behind the 8 ball. So it'll be interesting to see whether Chin can actually find a way back by Hill again.
Josh Chin apparently has his default iRacing color set to his traditional purple, but has decided not to run as a purple car for the GT3. I do have to wonder where the purple is. I don't remember seeing Josh ever in a non-purple car, I'll be honest.
It's a foreign concept to me as well, Arjuna. I've always known him to be at least partially purple, and I don't see any purple on that car, but of course Josh will probably come on and correct us that there is some minute part of the car that is purple somewhere, but
yeah. I mean,
I don't see anywhere.
I can't even help him out. I got a blue, I got a pink. I don't really have a purple that I can use to fill in the gaps here, unfortunately. Here, yeah. We'll have to get that changed for the next round. Poor Tyler Graf is just thinking about all the extra work that we're adding onto his plates with paints that will get submitted, because something that I have made my mission over the course of 2023 is that we need our lives easier in the commentary booth. Andrew, who is driving that car?
That is one of the geodesic racing cars. I think that's Young.
Okay. Who's driving this car?
67 is Betafer.
Okay, but the only way that you can know who it is by looking at the number and picking it out.
Yes.
Yeah, so we got 3 Hydra Race geodesic racing cars, and they're all identical except for the number. You see where I'm going with this?
Little bit of a problem as a commentator, I'm not going to lie here.
Yes, people seem to think that it's always a sharp production feed as well, but I've done broadcasts where it's literally been like 240p trying to figure out what's on the screen. It's always interesting when people think that you're not smart, but it's because you literally cannot read. That came out wrong. An engine blew up in pit lane, as I think that was Tyler Graf, unfortunately, who is up on the jacks. In fact, now he's going to drop and roll. Bomber's back has also come down to pit lane, but he has not left after all of that. Haven't seen anything from race control so far, Andrew.
No, nothing from race control so far. I think they've been content to just let this play out. There's been some contact, but I feel like most of the contact has either been sort of racing deals, or it's been a case where the contact has penalized itself almost, especially in the case of Bomber's back, where he's been sitting on pit lane far longer than Tyler Graf has at this point.
Self-policing is, I guess,
exactly
the way that it's put. Here comes Villa, as expected, early in, but with 32 minutes to go, should be comfortable in terms of fuel. Expect him to probably stop them for about 25, 26 seconds, somewhere in that ballpark, and then he'll drop and roll on his debut in this Lionheart Racing Series. As mentioned, 48 cars took to the green flag of a roster of 55. We're down to 42 left running. Alex Gouillon, the final one of those cars. He is 8 laps down, but I'll give him kudos for, at the very least, sticking out there and trying to recover some spots. Villa, 24 seconds on the nose, drops and is away.
And it was a nice stop from Villa, and this was what we were sort of expecting. He was the first of the drivers to come down the first time around. He's the first of the GT3 drivers to really come down the second time around as well. Hoping to use that undercut once again to find some time, find some clean air, and leapfrog his way up towards the front of this field. The trick is on this stint, though, Arjuna, is we talked about this earlier. Everyone else who's able to go past the 30-minute mark, the farther past, the lower the level of fuel that they need to get to the finish line, and the lighter the car is going to be, and the faster they're going to be on that final stint.
I haven't really talked about how dangerous pit exit is at this track as well, because it basically spits you right out onto the exit of turn number 1, which is a high speed, high commitment, brave corner. Turn 1 separates the brave from the silly is, I think, the best way to describe it, because the silly are always willing to go off into the gravel, whereas the brave genuinely would back out of it before they got that far.
And I will tell you that the relative is very important around the pit stop time, especially if you're in an LMDH car here. You need to know if a GT3 car is coming out of that pit lane, because the closing rate is so high, and they are going to spit right out onto your line, and you cannot have that quite as high a commitment if you're in that LMDH car. As we see Eric Staropoli come down pit lane this time by.
I think it's Eric Staropoli, but I'm sure I'll be corrected by someone up on the jacks, and again going to be taking tires. This is again one of those additions, or changes rather, to mimic the IMSA WeatherTech Sportscar Championship that iRacing have taken on, where tires and fuel can be done at the same time. That's not something they allow in the World Endurance Championship. The World Endurance Championship, I think, doesn't even let you spin you can't even have the engine on while you're up on the jacks. IMSA has a rule about not wheel spinning before you drop and roll, or something along those lines. There's all sorts of safety shenanigans about pit lane. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about that. And now does the BMW, I say BMW, they're all BMWs in this field. Does the 93 come out in the midst of traffic? Well, fortunately, he comes out in front of some GT3 cars, but right in the thick of it all, and Carlos Villa, 1.4 seconds in front.
So it was a good pit stop there for Villa, good sequence. Gotten him out right where he needed to be, but he's also right in the middle of traffic, and there's a little bit of GTP traffic going through there as well.
I've had plenty of rants about multi-class racing standards, specifically about prototypes that seem to be unable to look where they drive. But this has been relatively clean. I haven't had to break out the moniker that is GTP equals I'm going to pass, LMP2 is let me pass, and GTD, which is what IMSA calls the GT3 spec cars, stands for going to die. Been relatively impressed. Although having said that, probably to the chagrin of Austin Young, who is now 4 seconds separated from the charging Marius Valiokis.
And really, it is a charging Valiokis that's going on here, Arjuna. Young, yes, he's been held up a little bit in traffic, but it hasn't been to the extent that maybe we were thinking. I think really it's just Valiokis has found some speed in this car. He's found some lines that really work for him, and now that he's in less traffic, he's able to just bang out lap after lap, and he is closing down lap after lap on that number 11 car of Young.
Maybe we'll get a paint scheme for him in time for the next round. Let's not forget that that is just a week from today. We'll go to the legendary Spa-Francorchamps, 7 kilometers in length. Plenty of elevation change here if you feel like we're missing it here today. So Josh Chin saw Christopher Hill take down to pit lane, and he has come out well clear of Carlos Villa, which is important in terms of course, that battle for the final step of the podium. Josh Chin did a 2:00.273, fastest car except for the front 2 on track last time by. Can really tell that we're into what is, I think, going to be a crucial stage, because drivers are having to make pick decisions not just based on the strategy they were thinking about, Andrew, but their positions in traffic as well.
Yeah, gauging the traffic and gauging when to come in is very important here. Some drivers, particularly the drivers who are looking to go as long as possible, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, and you might want to bail out of your strategy just a little bit early if you're coming up on some really slower traffic here. So it's really interesting. It's a really interesting time to be a strategist, whether it's a spotter or whether you're trying to do the strategy all on your own from the cockpit. You have to be on your toes, and you have to be willing to be flexible at this point in the race.
So John Bader, for crucially, is going to come out in some clean air. His teammate Graham Saunders, who after his failure to put fuel in the car did roll back out onto track, running in 15th spot, filtering in behind him as Ryan Otis brings his car down to the pit lane. What was it? 2020 Lionheart Retro Series champion.
And of course, Otis is no slouch on these road courses, and he's been showing some really good speed in these GT3 cars, just like he did in those Retro Series cars as well. So not really a surprise to see Otis as far forward as he is, but I think that he's only going to get better as he settles into the GT3 cars here as well, Arjuna.
So again, a busy pit lane leaving what is, of course, Ryan Otis, but entering as Marius Valiokis in that race clutch entry, and so he's decided it's time to come on in. Drew White also leaves pit lane as Valiokis is going to find his box and slide on in for the final time today.
And this is really going to put pressure on Young out in first place. Will Young respond this lap, or will he try and extend as far as he can? He went basically just as far as he possibly could on that first stint, so he's got a lot of fuel on board. Valiokis, meanwhile, has used the lower fuel load, I think, to great advantage here. And I think he's going to find himself in a really strong spot when he comes back out. He's just got to make sure that he gets some clean air here. And I think he will indeed filter into a nice clean spot on the track, just a little bit of GT3 traffic that he should negotiate no problem here through turn 3.
Georgian Zalda that he dispatches off with clinicism through turn 3. Yes, that is turn 3. Don't get me started on it. We'll go to Red Bull Ring. We're going to go to Road America. I'm going to get started on it plenty this season. I have no doubt about that. Austin Young through Jean-de-Bion in towards Le Mans. You watch that bottom right portion of your screen. Almost comes a cropper of some traffic that got a bit of a wash out of the penultimate corner. Young's on to lap 16. Hypothetically, he could go 1 or 2 laps longer than this, and let's not forget that there's the potential for him to take even less fuel into his car as a result of that one, and it does not look as though he's cutting back in. He's staying out there for one more lap.
And this is a really interesting call from him. Again, I think that he should have probably responded to Valiokis here, because Valiokis was able to take a little bit of a lower fuel. He only had 25 minutes of race time left when he went into the pit stop, so it's not like he had to take that full fuel tank and really get it full. He's going to have a lower fuel load as well. So I think Valiokis is going to be able to bang out some really fast times here. But two of the drivers that are responding to Valiokis are Phil Kraus and Flynn Lazier, both down pit lane this time by.
Absolutely, and these two drivers are two to watch. They've been locked in their tussle all the way through. Kraus is going to go up on the jacks. Interesting to note that that was not the case there for Flynn Lazier. He's electing not to try and take tires. We'll see how it all shakes up, though, in terms of actual pit stop time. How are they going to race each other off the lane? Lazier's already off and away. 23 seconds the stop time there for Phil Kraus. Lazier, 17 seconds rather, stationary. No tires, a bit of a gamble maybe, but with the cooling track conditions, could it be the right call?
It's going to be interesting to see what happens here for sure, Arjuna. It's tough to say. I think with the cooling track conditions, this just might have a chance of working here for Lazier. But at the same time, having a driver like Phil Kraus behind you within 3 seconds of you on fresh tires, it's going to be really difficult to keep that number 91 behind him.
Check back in with Austin Young and see if he'll head down to pit lane this time of asking. Sean Campbell and Brian Bennett, those are the final two cars yet to have pitted. And Josh Chin has come out in front of Ryan Otis through the cycle of pit stops. So there's been a jump there as well with the overcut from Josh Chin, enabling to grab second on track.
And this is exactly what we expect out of Josh Chin. Not only can he pass cars the hard way on track, but he can also do it in pit lane, through pit strategy, through knowing exactly how much he needs to push the car on those in laps, on those out laps to maximize the time. He did exactly that and was able to leapfrog Ryan Otis, who's had such a strong day today.
It's been a good day for Ryan Otis, it really has. Blocker's going to stay out along with Austin Young, Alexander Van der Sant, Mike Rasmussen, and David Sirwa. But realistically, it is only Austin Young that we care about. Blocker's going to drop back outside of the top 5 in all reality. And as Brian Beard comes into pit lane, it leaves Sean Campbell, the final GT3 car left standing. He's got a 66-second lead right now. I know that won't be the tally by the time he rolls out of pit lane, but it might as well be another country. It might as well be over at the Daytona International Speedway at this point.
Campbell's been in a league of his own so far in the GT3 field, and it's just been a clinic. But I will say with Blocker, he doesn't have very much to lose. You talk about how he's going to cycle out behind the top 5, but he's going to have the least amount of fuel. I'm guessing he's probably not going to take tires, so he's going to have probably a 5-second slower or 5-second faster pit stop than some of his competitors, and he's going to be just that little bit lighter on fuel compared to everyone else. So I think Blocker maybe could look at, if he plays this right, a top 5, top 7 finish, despite that mistake that we saw from him earlier.
See how it plays out. Brian Bennett has jumped in front of Carlos Villa as a result of his late pit stop. He's up 6 positions as a result of this. Plenty of excitement still, I'm sure, to come. Check back in with Chin and Otis as they file out of tower corner in single file formation. LMDH of Phil Kraus blasting on past, and now riding over the left shoulder of number 95. Chris Hill's a full 5 seconds back, so they're not too concerned about the Team Watson Racing 101. Instead, it's very much 2 cars left to tussle for this position. Sean Campbell's come into pit lane and he's emerged, well, guess where? Clear at the front of the field to the tune of almost 30 full seconds. Miraculously, though, we were told the LMDH fuel window would be between 18 to 19 laps. Austin Young, leading this race, has decided to go 19 laps. Any worries we had about Valiokas closing on him, well, this will definitely go to help him.
It absolutely will, but at the same time, in order to get this type of mileage, he has been saving fuel, and it has allowed Valiokas to get closer to him. So the real question for me here at this point is just how short will this pit stop be for Austin Young? Will he be able to convert that? Because Valiokas really has been able to be pushing for the last 5 or so laps on the fresher tires. So it's going to be very interesting to see just how much of an advantage Valiokas has versus the shorter pit stop potentially that Young has.
I really just love looking at the way these cars commit through Sunset Bend. Austin Young into the pit lane. Valiokas still yet to come through Tower Corner. He's got a ways to go on this lap of his. And so as Austin Young hits the pit road limiter, you can see the flashing of the lights confirming he has actually engaged the pit limiter as well. He'll find his box, slide into it, and fortunately does not overcommit.
It was important for him to be able to come in and hit those marks properly. He's done that, job one. A little bit surprised to see that he's taking the tires here. I probably, with only 18 minutes left, would have seen him maybe not take tires here, sort of same as Flynn Lazier, but he's rolling again. Valiokas is still in Sunset Bend here, so he's going to come out well clear of Valiokas.
Yeah, it was never really a worry, was it? Tires or no tires, it is still Austin Young that emerges with the lead of the race here in round 1 of the ButtKicker Sportscar Championship, the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Sebring, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. Where's Adam Blocker going to fare out in all of this then as he revs up the engine, spools up the car? It's a bit of a lazy launch initially as well, just 15.7 seconds for him. Badefer on through, and Blocker is going to be in 6th position, about 4 seconds back of the number 67 Hydro Race Geodesic Racing entry. I guess the question now becomes fight for second in GT3, Chin versus Otis. Lots of focus on that. Also the fight for the final step of the podium. Flynn Lazier now trying to hold off the charging Phil Kraus.
And don't forget that Flynn Lazier is on those older tires. He did not take tires on the last pit stop. Phil Kraus on the newer tires. He's going to be putting a lot of pressure on the back of Flynn Lazier, and Adam Blocker as well with that 15-second stop. I will also note did not take tires there, so he's probably locked into that 6th position, assuming that he can keep his teammate Alexander Van de Sant behind. And I believe that Caleb Bensi in that pit cycle, something happened with Bensi, and he is falling well behind the fight where he was up closer to the 6th spot there for a while.
He did have a rather lengthy pit stop, so we'll go and see if we can pick up anything that happened to him, but I didn't necessarily see it initially, so it's going to be something that maybe...
Oh, here comes Kraus.
Great run out of Le Mans, and maybe a bit of a checkup for Flynn Lazier in the Penguin RC car, but he's still got the inside line into the corner of a million different ways to take it. Kraus will send it all the way around and directly into the wall. Phil Kraus's race will come to an end. The Lionheart Open Wheel Series champion heads to pit lane.
Oh my, that is not a mistake that you see from Phil Kraus very often. He just got way too deep in there. His eyes got big as he saw the opportunity to get around Flynn Lazier. Flynn Lazier went in deep. Phil Kraus went in deeper, and it turns out that it was just simply too deep, and he hit that outside wall a ton.
And you could see crabbing all the way back to pit road. It means that it will be Adam Blocker that inherits a top 5 spot as a result of that. But my days, that's not something you expect out of Phil Kraus. Let's go back and take a look, though, maybe at some other stuff that's happened as Barrett Rolfe, Carlos Villa, was not having a great day. Barrett Rolfe confirmed that was not meant to be.
Yeah, that was not the fault of Carlos Villa there. Barrett Rolfe, he went in, tried to overtake about 3 GT3 cars, and the third one just wasn't meant to be. And then a little bit of a sympathetic second incident there. That's a little bit clumsy from the GT3 car there.
I think that was Chris Reagan not communicating his intentions clearly, and potentially that's part of why all of that happened there. So that's a little bit more of its own little bit of confusion. 15 minutes now left to run in this race. We'll first check out what happened, I guess, to the poor Phil Kraus, and then we'll go and try and take a look at what happened to Caleb Benzie if we can, because at the front of the field it's up to 10 full seconds, and I don't get the sense that we are concerned about a fight for the race lead in either of our classes. On board with Kraus, I mean, he was always heading to the wall, let's be real.
Yeah, it's just the case where he was trying to outbrake Flynn Lazier into that corner, and Flynn Lazier was already really deep into the corner, and Kraus tried to carry the momentum out around the outside, and he just needed to be on the brakes about 50 meters before he was.
Say 50 meters, I say 1,500 meters earlier at that point. You also go down the gears a little bit earlier. You try and get down to 4th if you can in that car just to make your life a little bit easier, but poor Phil Kraus. What a dramatic start to this campaign. Sean Campbell is not unknown to us due to his exploits in the Lionheart Retro Series, of course. Austin Young was the one that maybe the question marks hung over in the very crowded LMDH field.
Yeah, but Austin Young, he has definitely answered a lot of those question marks here today. He was under some pressure from Valiocus through the middle stage of the race, but he executed the pit strategy perfectly, and he has really gotten a good gap going as well. So I do think that if Adam Blocker hadn't made that mistake, we could have maybe seen a little bit more pressure there at the front. Same with some of these other drivers who have fallen by the wayside, like a Graham Sanders, like a Phil Kraus. But look at that coming into pit lane. That was not ideal from either of those drivers.
And was that Brian Bennett in? It was. And I mean, I don't really know what more you want a GT3 car to do in that situation. I'm also not exactly clear what Caleb Benzie could do differently, but he comes from the wrong side of the cone. Maybe could have been a bit more patient.
Yeah, that's just Benzie. He tried to get around a GT3 car in a spot where he just simply shouldn't have done it. It's as simple as that, and it's cost him a penalty, and that's probably what's put him back. Is not necessarily any damage from that incident, but a penalty because he came from the outside of that cone, the commitment cone on the entrance to pit lane.
Oh, could that have been it as well? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I think that it was a commitment cone violation there, Arjuna.
Very possible. Let's see if we can get confirmation with 12 minutes left to go. Where is your race leader on track? Austin Young through the double left-handers. Nope, he's coming down into Cunningham Corner, excuse me. The way the camera is moving slightly fooled me there. So he's got about half a lap still left to go before he comes back towards the line. Lap times in this BMW M Hybrid V8 are about 1 minute 44s at this point in the stint. So we are probably heading down into the final 8 to 10 laps of the race at this point.
Yeah, it's right down into that crunch time, and this is the part where it gets a little bit dicey if you're the leader for Austin Young. You can see he's sort of back down the pace once again, just sort of managing the gap to Valiocus, but this is where it starts to get a little bit dangerous because you're starting to not only catch the back of the GT3 field, but you're also starting to catch the back of the LMDH field, so he's starting to put the likes of David Sirwa and Matt Taylor a lap down, and this is where it can get dicey because you're actually starting to lap cars that are about the same speed as you are, Judah.
That is also a very fair point. See how hard they wish to fight as well. I don't think that we're going to see Austin Young too concerned at this point. Although, if he runs himself off into the gravel any more times, that will not help the cause. Really does check up behind as well. And that is going to clear himself of at least one bit of the traffic. I believe that was Alex Guyon, 8 laps down anyway, and just trying to salvage a couple of points here and there. Josh,
that sequence of corners there, Arjuna, that costs Young a full second.
Traffic gives and the traffic takes. It's why it's such a famous saying. We'll have to come up with something better. We'll have to come up with the Lionheart version of that.
Yeah, we'll put our best writers on it between now and Spa.
Yeah, they've only got 7 days. I hope they're getting paid enough. If not, we'll just make them work harder anyway. It's fine.
That's the Race Spot way, isn't it?
Yes. Who is writing my scripts for me next week, by the way?
It's definitely not me. That's all I can say.
I think we'll get Dame Baird to do it.
I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, absolutely. 10 minutes left to play here in round number 1. 90-minute time race is a bit of a change as well, given that usually we are distance limited rather than now time limited. Especially in the GT3 field, that will be a couple of questions as to how many laps you'll need to put into the car at the end. It's a little bit easier in the LMDH, given that you're in control of, well, relative control if you're the leader, of when you cross the line and how fast you're really going.
Absolutely. And so I said earlier this lap that Young lost a second to Valiokis. Well, now Valiokis has also lost. So we need our script writers now, because I'm about to say the same thing again. The traffic gives and the traffic takes away, and it's taken away from Valiokis on that lap.
I just need a graphic that will leave it on screen all the time. It's been a great run for a couple of the AM drivers. As it stands right now, it's going to be Chase Wilson that will be the best of them. He's tucked up behind Eric Staropoli. They've got 5 seconds back to Chris Staples, who will be second in AM. 2 of your AM drivers cracking the top 10 in race number 1.
And they've got to be happy with this, especially with the caliber of the field that's been at the front of the GT3 field throughout the course of this race. Of course, Sean Campbell has been just on a different planet compared to everyone else, but you look at the likes of Josh Chin and Ryan Otis. If you're in the top 10 with guys like that, you are definitely doing something right here.
Yeah, no, I think the GT3 class are going to be interesting. Of course, all in this BMW M4 GT3. Let's not beat around the elephant in the room. Andrew, that front end, what's your opinion?
So it's grown on me. I like the paint schemes where there's the clear bar in the middle of it. When it's more blended in, I don't like it as much where it's just 2 halves, but when it seems like it's more 4 quarters, I like that more.
Okay, well, I will say, I'm not sure about the front end of the M4 GT3. I do like the front end of the M Hybrid V8.
The M Hybrid is definitely a beautiful looking car from pretty much any angle that you look at it.
Yeah, except they couldn't have picked a worse name for it, could they?
No, it's a really clumsy name, I've got to say.
M Hybrid V8. I mean, what are we doing? 8 minutes to go as your leader crosses the line, so it should mean, I think, 5 laps left to go then, maybe 6. I'm not 100% confident on that. Talk a little bit more about the history of this fantastic track, because there really isn't too much wheel-to-wheel action, at least, that we have at this point in time. I mentioned, of course, that the first Sebring 12 Hours was hosted back in 1952, but the way that this facility was conceived was when Alec Ullman was flying over the airfield, was trying to find a place to bring Le Mans-style racing to the US, saw the airfield from up above, as that was a bit of a mistake there from Austin Young. It was not the ideal line through the hairpin. He saw the track rather from up above and said, you know what, let's come there and let's bring our racetrack over here. Eventually, Formula One came here as well, but it has very much become the home of endurance racing. There haven't been too many track changes, but back in 1983 is when they actually adjusted the track configuration to mean that the airfield, which is still an active airfield, could continue operating while the track was being used for racing. Which means that, yes, you may actually at times see planes taking off alongside Sebring, as John Baderfer may have taken off the track and let Adam Blocker through to 4th.
It looks like that's exactly what's happened here, because Baderfer had a comfortable lead, and it just looks like he locked the rear brakes into the hairpin, and he was able to gather it up, and not a lot of time was lost, but it was just enough for Adam Blocker to slip through. And we saw his teammate almost do the exact same thing, and fortunately Young was able to keep it on the track, but Baderfer just goes a little bit wide there, and he's got all the work in front of him. 2 seconds up the road to Adam Blocker now.
And so Blocker's recovery drive sees him at least grabbing some points, which are going to be important. Remember, we have technically 4 main championships to talk about. LMDH, GT3 Pro, GT3M, team championships. So actually then 2 team championships because it's an LMDH and GTP. There's no rookie championships because I guess everyone's a rookie. Phil Kraus, by the way, after 10 minutes of repairs. Let's see how this looks on the graphic.
It looks mostly square, I'm going to say, but 617 seconds of repairs is certainly a long time to be in the pit lane there, Arjuna.
I mean, that's a sturdy car if they were able to get it dinged up in time. What's just happened to Austin Young, though? Because now Austin Young only leads by 6 full seconds. Do we have drama in the closing stages? It's a car by itself on the way to the hairpin. I've seen this one before, and I'm sure I'll see it again. Austin Young somehow makes the mistake at the hairpin.
And he did the exact same thing as his teammate did, and it's the same thing that he almost did the lap before as well. So I'm almost wondering whether the settings that they have in the car, there aren't very many settings that you can adjust with this fixed setup racing, but I believe one of them is the brake bias, so I'm wondering if they're just on the wrong brake bias setting for this late in the fuel run.
Yes, but let's not forget that there are things that you do in the setup with master cylinders and brake pressures as well to get the brakes dialed in for what you want. And with a fixed setup, it may mean that some of these drivers not having the feel that they would be accustomed to is, I think, probably the best way to put it. Should be 3 laps to go this time by because Austin Young crossed the line with about 4 minutes and 20 seconds left to go. Nice. Past some traffic. No major drama for him. Is there going to be any sort of a charge from Betafer? He's 1.7 seconds back. There's not much traffic for him and Blocker to have to work their way through, which might actually hurt the number 67.
Yeah, but keep in mind for Betafer that Blocker didn't take tires on that last pit stop because he tried to do the undercut and take on only the 15 seconds of fuel needed. So Blocker is on the older tires, Betafor on the newer tires, slightly higher fuel load, but I think the Betafor is the faster car at this point.
So 1.7 seconds that margin. Caleb Bensi, who's in that race-first car, is trying to claw his way back up to Alexander Van der Sant. Is now only 1.2 seconds off of the Powerslide Motorsports number 96, and so he'll have a couple more cracks at trying to get back up into the top 6. And still, I think there is the chance that that may happen. All the GT3 squabbling, though, has settled down for the time being. So at this point in the race, most drivers know exactly how things are going, including the WMP Racing number 26 of Sean Campbell. Now 40 seconds clear at the front of the field.
And fortunately for Campbell, that's enough that he can make a serious mistake and still take home the win here. So he has really done an awesome job just start to finish on this race. There's never really been a doubt as to who had the best drive here today, and it's been Sean Campbell all the way.
Do you know what WMP stands for?
I do not.
Wear my pipes. There's a joke in there, I'm sure, somewhere. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I tried to find it. I'm at a loss right now.
Sean Campbell, though, I tell you what, he's got cars in front of him, lapped cars, and this is what the top-level drivers will do. They'll see the nervy moments, and they'll just bide their time and work their way on through. It's side-by-side between Marquez and Moll. This is the battle for 13th and 14th positions, and the race leader sits in the wait, just trying to slither on through. There goes Flynn Lazier as well, blasting his way on past. It's a very different sort of a race, Andrew, to what anyone who has watched Lionheart Racing Series competition over the previous 10 years will be accustomed to.
Absolutely, but it's been action-packed throughout this race. There's been drama, there's been mistakes, there's been people getting used to this style of racing, and I think it's really produced a fascinating race from start to finish here, Arjuna.
Marquez going to be under fire from Dean Moll, but into Cunningham Corner. Backing out of it is the Synergy Motorsports car. Sean Campbell able to navigate through safely. Took him half a lap, probably cost him a second or two. But when you've got 30 seconds, 40 seconds in the tank, you can afford to leave a couple of seconds on the table. Coming out of the penultimate corner, though, It's Austin Young, the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing number 11. That's going to round his way through Sunset Bend and take the white flag in the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Sebring, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. One more lap to go in the championship opener.
Yeah, but Young is still on it. You can see just how close he came to the outside wall through Sunset Bend. He is still on it. He is still pushing. So this race is still not done. Valiocus only 6.5 seconds behind. Young cannot afford to lock the brakes one more time, and we've seen him do it once already, Arjuna.
We have. Outside of that, though, LMDH has settled out. Bensi still 1.3 back from Van der Sant. Betafer now 2.5 back from Blocker. It's in the GT3s where we can focus our attention, albeit briefly, because Brian Bennett, Carlos Villa, they've still got half a lap and then a full lap left to go. Bennett involved in the contact with Bensi on pit lane entry in the second phase of the pit stop cycle. Carlos Villa struggled with tires early doors, now in a spot to be able to fight his way back into the top 6 and recover a little bit of ground.
Yeah, it's been a really strong battle and a strong debut for some of these drivers here, Bennett being one of them. And the number 62 of Morehart, we barely talked about him, but he's just been nice and clean throughout this race. Over a minute behind Sean Campbell at the end of this race, but at the same time, a top 5 has got to be really strong for some of these drivers. Ooh. Oh, that was a big incident for Lazier.
And that's poor George Anzaldo that just got turfed into the wall there. Not how I think he would have wanted that to go. Hellacious incident. iRacing Damage Model gets a showcase. I tell you what, though, what a showcase BMW virtual machines have had here today. In the LMDH, the M Hybrid V8s put on a show, while in the GT3s, the M4 GT3 continued to prove why it's one of Sportscar's finest. At the front, though, taking the victory in the very first ButtKicker Sportscar Series race, it's Austin Young that conquers the bumps of the Sebring International Raceway to win the ButtKicker Grand Prix of Sebring, presented by Gomez Sim Industries. We'll wait for Sean Campbell to rise his way to the line to grab the victory in the GT3 Pro field. He's a full 37 odd seconds clear of those behind. If this is a taste for what we're in for the rest of the year, well, we might as well all just pack a lunch and watch Sean Campbell on his rise to the championship. A dominant display, and Sean Campbell in that number 26 WMP BMW M4 GT3 car runs his way to the line. It'll be a lengthy wait before we then see Chase Wilson grab the victory in GT3M. But Andrew, a fantastic way to start off the campaign.
Absolutely, it's been a fascinating start to this campaign. One of the big questions to start this day was who was going to be the drivers who were going to rise to the top. Were they the Lionheart veterans? Were they some of the new sports car veterans that have come into this series with this new race series that we have in the sports car series? And I think Austin Young and Sean Campbell really showed just how strong some of those sports car veterans can be. But Adam Blocker and some of the Lionheart veterans, they were the ones who made the mistakes, which were a little bit surprising to me, Arjuna. I think that what we're going to see in the races to come is those mistakes are going to go away pretty quickly, and we're going to have a knockdown, drag-out fight to the end of this championship.
In both classes as well, relatively dominant victories. Yes, in the LMDH it was maybe a little bit closer than the pace would have suggested, but definitely something that I think these drivers will be slightly worried about moving on forward. It's a big old field, and so we wait for the final couple of cars to come across the line, and of course most notably for us to be able to celebrate as Chase Wilson crosses the line to grab the victory in your GT3 AM, 8th overall in the GT3 combined field as well in that Twisted Racing team number 13. Not unlucky 13 here today, that is for sure. Finally, the flagman continues to get that arm workout going in as two more cars trundle towards the line, and I think Brian Bennett may actually have run out of fuel on his quest to make it to the line. Mike Rigney will blast on past instead, as Brian Bennett unfortunately will drop behind the likes of Carlos Villa, Eric Staropoli and Chase Wilson to be classified in 9th.
Heartbreaking there for Bennett, but at least he was able to get across that line. That's one of the things that when you're running out of fuel like that, it's just nice to be able to coast, even if you're going 20 miles an hour. If you can make it across that line, you feel like you've accomplished your goal, even if you cut it a little bit too close for comfort.
Let's grab a look at your ButtKicker race results. Not sure if there's going to be any race control intervention, but Austin Young surely shouldn't be too worried about that. He's 6 and a bit seconds clear of Marius Valiokis in the race clutch entry, but Hydra Race Geodesic starting off on top. Flynn Lazier grabs the third and final step on the podium for Penguin RC Simulations in front of Adam Blocker, who was able to recover back up to 4th position. John Baderfer completes the top 5 with Alexander Van der Sant scrambling a 6th place finish after qualifying down in 16th in front of Caleb Bensi, in front of Fowler, Siwa and Taylor, the rest of your top 10. 1 lap down, Tyler Groff scored in 11th along with Graham Saunders in 12th spot too, after not getting fuel into the car in the first pit stop. Did head back out there, moving from 15th up to 12th. In front of Bauerolf, in front of the likes of Phil Krause, who had a hellacious incident in the closing stages through Sunset Bend. Mike Rasmas, Alex Guyon, Kite Bommersbach and Michael O'Brien make up the rest of the LMDH field. In the GT3s, it was the WMP Racing number 26 of Sean Campbell that grabs the victory. Almost 40 seconds clear of Josh Chin for the private label Team Hype. What a drive it was for Florida's own. Chin able to hold off Ryan Otis and build a 6-second advantage in the closing stages, while Christopher Hill impresses on debut in the Team Watson Racing 101 to finish 4th. Matthew Morthart 5th with Carlos Villa behind, just edging out Eric Staropoli in a drag race to the line. Chase Wilson, the best of the AMs, he finishes 8th in front of Brian Bennett, who spluttered his way to the checkered flag. Chris Staples finishes 10th, second of the AMs, and in front of James Paulson, who rounds out your AM class podium. Andrew Marquez and Dean Moll 12th and 13th, with Chris Reagan, Lionel Callisto, Trevor Malone, Jim Herrick, Dustin Wardlow, Craig Forsyth, and Drew White making up the rest of the top 20. Mike Rigney, Creighton Carter, Clint Martin, Eliza Indranini, George Anzaldo, Gabriel Wood, Sam Crow, Nate Siefker, Miguel Vigo, and Luis Gonzalez Nunez. That's the rest of the 30 cars that ended up taking out to the Sebring International Raceway. And so with that, it leads us directly into our ButtKicker post-race show, and we will not delay much longer. We will head down to HyperX Victory Lane for the very first time this season to chat with not one, but 2 winners, as Austin Young for the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing team takes the very first victory. Austin, what a victory it was. Talk us through the emotions coming out on top in the season opener.
Yeah, a lot of fun. It's been fun kind of practicing with the fixed set. Put in a really good quali lap, so got P1 there and was able to get a decent lead at the start of the race. Then unfortunate for Adam getting forced off with traffic. But yeah, it was all good. Last stint, we were definitely leaking some oil. But a lot of fun, man.
You kind of said it right there. A couple of cars slipping and sliding off the track, including yourself at one point with this fixed setup. How were you finding the balance on the brakes?
It felt good until I changed rears on the last pit stop, and it definitely made the car threw the balance all over the place. So I was struggling with that, and then the front tires were basically dead at the end of the race for me.
We've got an interesting championship schedule coming up. Of course, we go to Spa in 7 days' time, but we're really going all across the world. What are you looking forward to in the course of the rest of this ButtKicker Sports Car Championship?
I'm stoked. The schedule looks really fun. Definitely looking forward to almost every track on the schedule. So excited, ready for Spa, and ready for the next couple of races.
Well, congratulations on the victory to kick off the season, Austin. We'll see you in 7 days' time as we head to the Ardennes.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Austin Young, HyperX Victory Lane in the LMDH class. We're now joined by Sean Campbell in your GT3 class. Sean, 40 seconds clear. Looked like you had a comfortable margin at the front. How are you feeling after 90 minutes of racing?
I guess in a word, comfortable. You know, it was calming. Getting to drive around, work on being smooth and whatnot, and watching for the traffic.
We of course saw you be victorious in a handful of the Lionheart Retro Series races in that Lotus 79, but I get the feeling that you're really here to show your strength in this GT3 car. It doesn't matter what GT3 manufacturer you're in as well, you always seem to find the speed in it.
I guess. I guess GT3 is, like you said, GT3 is what I drive. Lotus 79 I've had a lot of time in, but GT3 is I want to say, bar none, the most I've driven on iRacing.
So you say it was a calming race. What was the experience like with traffic here in the first round of the series?
Honestly, it wasn't that bad. A lot of it was really clear, like where they were going to go, where they weren't going to go. Some of it was a little dicey, but that was when they were battling, so it's expected, right? And, made it through cleanly enough.
Well, congratulations on the very first victory of the series, and we'll see you in 7 days' time as we head up to Spa.
All right, thanks.
Sean Campbell on top in the GT3 class, and that will wrap up our post-race interviews. And it is a quick turnaround for these drivers, Andrew. It's not over to... I think I've got myself mixed up here because it's not over to Watkins Glen. It is indeed over to Spa-Francorchamps instead, but we're very much looking forward to the next round of the championship.
Absolutely, and it's a little bit of a different challenge here for these drivers going to Spa-Francorchamps. Of course, the bumps at Sebring is the story. At Spa, the racetrack is almost billiard table smooth. Of course, it's up to full Formula One standard, and it is a completely different challenge. But at the same time, it's a flowing track, and there's going to be lots of interesting things that are going to happen with traffic there. And of course, track limits is always a topic for debate there at Spa.
Well, and I think the other thing to look at is you compare the likes of the Circuit de la Sarthe, Monza versus Imola. Some of those tracks that are tighter and twistier. We're going to have to deal with traffic management in a lot of different ways, and I think a lot of the drivers, Andrew, will head out of this first round knowing that, okay, now I know how some of these other drivers are on track. I can take that forward into the next round of the championship.
Absolutely. They've got some experience down, but again, I think because Spa is going to be so different with the long straightaways and the fast flowing corners, there's not going to be, it's going to be a little bit of a different beast. So this is really going to give them a good flavor for the rest of the season as a whole, having both Sebring and Spa so early in the season, two very different types of traffic to deal with. It's going to teach a lot of people very quickly how to be good at traffic in this sports car series.
Well, before we wrap things up, it's time to thank those that make all of this possible, starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. ButtKicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine red line. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slicks. You'll get fitted with a racing suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about their thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, precision-built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time interactions between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. From simple logos to full branding for your company, virtual designs to liveries raced by Indy 500 champions, Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. Visit graphicsesports.com. What a start to the season it was, and so many names make it all possible. To learn more about the Lionheart Racing Series, the
competitions the sanctioning body puts on, or about its partners, head to LionheartRacingSeries.com, and don't forget to stay up to date on social media with the latest news from the world of the Lionheart Racing Series. We'll go racing 1 week from today from the Ardennes to continue the momentum in the 2023 ButtKicker Sportscar Championship presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. 90 minutes, 2 ultimate driving machines. It was a recipe set for excitement. It was a recipe that bubbled up with 2 deserving winners. Congratulations to Austin Young and to Sean Campbell, the very first winners in the series. On behalf of the team here at RaceSpotTV, for Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you for joining us to open off the campaign. We'll see you next time as we roll on for the rest of 2023 and Lionheart Racing Series competition.